Thank you for joining me. My name is Diana of Webinars by Rockwell. This video is designed with the administrative professional in mind and the unique job duties and tasks we are expected to do every day. With over 40 years of experience as a secretary, administrative assistant, and executive assistant, I hope my experience and skill sets can help you excel in your chosen or fallen into profession. I appreciate your choosing to spend the next few minutes with me as we discuss travel planning. Let's get started. Areas of focus for today's video are overview of trip, get itinerary details, get personal preferences, and communicate. Travel planning is stressful. Doing it for someone you don't know is more stressful. Once you understand what he or she prefers, it will be simpler. Having a checklist for the traveler to compare and complete will make it even easier and less stressful for both of you and for your boss. An overview of the trip. Where are they going and why? Whether you're traveling to one location or many, the process should remain the same for each step of the trip. How long will they be gone is essential for flights, hotel, car rentals, and every other aspect of the trip. Nothing can happen until you know those two things. Is the trip for business or personal, or maybe a combination of the two? The boss could be going to a conference or training, say in New Orleans, but wants to go a day early or stay a day late for sightseeing. Does the company use a travel agency, or do you make plans yourself? In my current position, we use a travel agency for the higher administrative personnel, the president and the vice presidents. The remaining assistant vice presidents and directors do self-planning. If you are uncomfortable with doing them yourself, you may want to use a travel agent. They can often find flights that you can't, and they know the better hotels and the ones to stay away from. Once you give them your boss's information, you don't need to give it again. That saves time and effort, making an additional fee well worth it. Get itinerary details, purpose, length, and logistics. If your boss is traveling for a conference or training, has the registration and payment been made? Ask if they're flying or driving. Even within 4 to 6 hours driving time, they may prefer to fly. That seems to be about the break line for whether to fly or drive. So that especially is important to ask. Getting to the airport 2 to 3 hours early to check in and get through security and wait for luggage after the flight may make it faster to drive in the long run. But don't assume, just ask the question. Also, will they be driving their own car or renting a car? There's another threshold that makes the trip more expensive to be reimbursed for mileage rather than the cost of renting a car and paying for gas. I once sent a coworker, when I worked in IT, to a conference in Cary, North Carolina, and we are in central New York. She drove her own car because she wanted to stay later to visit her daughter for the weekend who happened to live there. The mileage costs us around $600. Compare that to a rental, which would have been half the cost since she stayed a week. I was new at the time and I didn't realize that there was even an option to rent a car for someone that owned a car. I also sent another colleague to Washington, D.C. for training, which is about a 6 to 7 hour drive. He refused to drive his own car because he said his tires were bald. And he was so strapped for cash that he needed a cash advance for his meals and gas to get there. Interestingly enough, I found out later he was practically solely supported by his parents, who paid his rent for an apartment he shared with a roommate, so his rent was half of what others were paying in the area. They bankrolled him, so I'm not sure why he didn't have any money. He was working full-time as an IT technician at around $45,000. So I have no idea where his money was going other than to possibly student loans. Just beware that not everyone has disposable income or credit available, and approach accordingly. Try not to assume about someone's financial situation, as I did in that scenario. The next item is ground transportation. They may fly, but need a car upon arrival to get around. Always check for an airport shuttle or a taxi van service you can pay in advance. That saves them from trying to find transport when they hit the ground. If you're making arrangements for a high-level executive, they may prefer a limo or a Lincoln Town Car type of driver service. You don't want to send a multi-million-dollar corporate CEO to ride the hotel shuttle with 20 tourists and waste their time waiting around for the next trip to happen. I worked for a financial advisor for about 15 years during the middle of my career. I was not used to high living country clubs, city clubs, catered parties, or being around people who drove Cadillacs. It was a huge adjustment. And when he traveled, he preferred first class flights, car services, or rentals if he was staying for a while. He was making client visits, so he needed to get around after his arrival. He preferred king-size beds in his better hotel brands. He was large in stature, so a compact car just would not do. He wanted to convey confidence and wealth, so we rented the higher-end vehicles. He told me once that he didn't prefer those cars, actually, but the clients expected it to show that he could handle his own money or the company's money, so he should be able to handle theirs. Some clients he had serviced for 30 years, and some he had wined and dined for just as long in order to get them under management. Along with the car, he had nice suits, name brand shoes, ties, shirts. He ate at first-class restaurants and enjoyed highbrow foods like foie gras, prime rib, duck, beef Wellington, baked Alaska, and your typical bananas Foster. Our Christmas parties were held at a private club and had 3 or 4 courses with sorbet between to cleanse our palates. They served fine wine, and we provided $500 floral centerpieces for the tables. Waitresses in tuxedo skirt suits passed around hors d'oeuvres of crab rangoon, shrimp cocktail, bacon wrapped scallops, bruschetta, baked brie, and fruit and cheese platters with an open bar. So you'll need to know, while doing travel planning, if costs are a deciding factor when making arrangements, or is the comfort of the traveler paramount? I currently work for a college, and we have guest lecturers or other types of guests, as in major donors, come to campus. We arrange their travel, pay for rental cars or flights, hotels, etc., or we have a specific person pick them up personally at the airport. We have them stay at our best hotel. We're a very small town, under 5,000 people, but it is a resort area on a lake. We do upgrade the room so they have a larger bed. We try to get them a lake view with a balcony if possible, or we book a suite. Some guests, like the most recent one I made arrangements for, was a White House aide to the First Lady starting in the Reagan administration. She stayed in a place called Belhurst Castle on a neighboring lake where the rooms are individually decorated with antiques and they have wine fed to their water fountains. I understand it's quite an experience. If part of their trip is personal, you may want to ask if they want activities scheduled. Many hotels will assist with concierge service and get theater or concert tickets just by asking. They can also help arrange restaurant reservations if your boss needs to take clients or vendors to dinner. They will know what's suitable for that level of service. Make sure you get their personal preferences. What type of car, which airline, which hotel, what seat on the plane is very important. With all the changes in the security levels since 9/11, and I believe they've increased them rather than relaxed them, we're still putting our personal hygiene products in Ziploc bags and bottles with under 3 ounces. You can't take a bottle of water through the TSA check-in. I once paid $4 for a 20-ounce bottle of Diet Coke. It's highway robbery, but you're stuck and you have no other choice. I am a knitter and crocheter, so traveling gives me uninterrupted time to work on projects. Some of the tools needed to work on a project are not allowed. Nail clippers is the big WTF moment for me. I don't know what kind of damage you can do to someone with that little file, but evidently you can. So you can bring safety scissors on the plane to cut your yarn, but there is a cutter with different size cutting instruments around in a circle. You wear it on a necklace. However, they don't let you take that on the plane. That's the least thing you could hurt someone with, but it's prohibited. The downside to all of the added safety measures is needing to identify while booking airfare. Changes made just prior to a flight cause extra pat downs or being taken into that little room for further investigation. We've all seen the videos of the 3-year-olds being searched in wheelchairs and an elderly man having his shorts pulled to the floor in a room full of other passengers for no reason. Then there's the indignity of the breast cancer patient who was forced to remove her clothing so they could search under her bra because of her IV port. We are forced to enter full name as it stands on your driver's license, date of birth, and the email of the passenger for any last-minute changes. For your records, you should have an emergency contact. Phone number, you don't need their address. They always ask for it. I don't know why. You'll need the credit card and their frequent flyer number, seat preference, whether it's window or aisle, in the middle of the plane, whether they want first class, business class, mid-range seating, over the wing, or in the back by the bathroom. Ask if they have a car rental company preference, as well as the vehicle style, and if they want additional insurance coverage. We actually have contracts with several car rentals for cheaper pricing. I don't want to badmouth any company. Just do your research and read reviews before booking a strange company you're not familiar with. Also, keep an eye out on the national news. For example, Hertz has been in the news recently for reporting stolen cars when renters extended their usage, and they do this for about 2,000 cars just last year. Many of these are in programs for Uber or ride shares and have long-term rental agreements with the company. One man had just paid for the next month when he was pulled over at gunpoint, made to lie on a busy highway face down on the road, was handcuffed and taken to jail for grand theft auto. One person rented a car for one day to stop off and visit his parents after business in New York City to their home in New Jersey. His flight was the next morning out of LaGuardia. He went to leave to catch his flight, and the car was gone. Hertz denies having tracking devices on their vehicles, but the parents' address was nowhere in the paperwork for the rental. And they found the neighbors' closed-circuit TV showing a tow truck picking it up around 4 a.m. He was not in a no parking zone. He was parked perfectly legally. He had not even had the car 24 hours. They charged this man the value of the car when it was in their lot the entire time. There was another very public criminal case where a person was charged with a crime they didn't commit and was found guilty. Why? Because Hertz would not comply with the subpoena for the proof of her receipt showing she was in another state in their rental car at the time of the crime. This woman spent 3 years in jail before Hertz finally ponied up the proof. Hotels can be hit and miss, even with the brand names. Hampton Inn used to be a lower cost option for families. Now they're competing with the higher end business travelers. Marriott used to be a respected name in the hotel business. Some of the neighborhoods have deteriorated so badly, I wouldn't stay there. And I've stayed in Times Square over a holiday weekend when a woman, quote, fell, end quote, from the 7th floor to her death. Always ask if the traveler has a preference for the brand hotel, the bed size, whether they need a handicapped room, they prefer a jacuzzi tub, or if they prefer a shower, if they would like to have a kitchenette, whether the hotel has a pool, a workout room, adjacent restaurant, a water view, balcony, or suites. Some people want to stay on the first floor. We made arrangements for a client who had a knee problem and she didn't want to have to walk up and down the stairs. However, as a single female, I would not be comfortable staying in a first floor unless there was bars on the windows or some sort of security, like the windows don't open. I'm always carrying tons of stuff into the hotel. It's not just a suitcase and a purse. I've got the laptop bag, I've got my knitting bag, and any snacks I might have. So walking up and down stairs for me is not always preferable. So check to see if there's an elevator as well, if you have any of those issues with your guest. Your boss may want a hotel with valet parking and bellhops. Keep a list of their hotel loyalty program numbers so they get points and maybe some extra perks when they stay. One suggestion that I used to do for my travelers was to set up a pocket folder for each trip. I printed off a copy of the airline itinerary, the hotel confirmation, any shuttle or car service reservations, a list of nearby restaurants, the name and phone number and email address of the person they are meeting, unless it's someone they already know. Also, any tickets I had purchased for them for shows or activities. Not only does it keep all of their important information in one place, it gives them a handy place to store their receipts. For the tech-savvy traveler, you can do the same by scanning all those documents to one PDF and sending it with high priority so it shows at the top of their inbox. Or share it on OneNote, Evernote, Google Docs, whatever app your boss prefers. This has, of course, already been discussed and decided upon between you and your boss before you make your arrangements. I'm only going to just touch on international travel. I have not done much with it, so I'm certainly not an expert. International travel adds an added layer of complexity. You now need to deal with passports, possibly visas, global cell phone coverage, special electrical adapters for charging cell phones and laptops. You may want to notify the credit card company, and they may want to let their bank know that they are traveling and where they're going. My husband worked for Toshiba in a factory where they made CRTs. This was before flat panels. He made several trips to Mexico, where they had a manufacturing facility. He made an ATM withdrawal in Brownsville, Texas, before he crossed the border, and the bank closed his account. No notification, they just closed it. He couldn't do anything about it for over a week because he was in Mexico for work. He had paid all of our bills before leaving town, so I wouldn't have to worry about it. And unfortunately, they bounced every single utility and debt payment we had made. He was so angry when he got back. The branch of the bank was very close to his office. So he went there and caused quite a ruckus. They eventually reopened the account, and he forced them to write apology letters to every place they bounced a check. Now you have to remember this was probably mid-90s, and Brownsville at that point was the capital in the US for stolen cars. There was a lot of crime from Mexicans crossing the border, doing the crime, and then getting back to Mexico. At this stage in the economy and upgraded security, it would be wise to let your bank know in advance. I had a friend whose mom went on cruises quite often, and one time she forgot to tell her bank. Now they lived in another small town, so they knew her and they knew her habits. So they called the house to make sure it wasn't a fraudulent withdrawal. But that's not going to happen in larger cities with larger banks. You also may want to look up the American Embassy where they're headed and have them add the contact information in their phone so they can call it if they end up in some kind of trouble. We hear of it happening all the time, and we just hope it doesn't happen to us. Planning in advance is always better than not having the information when you need it. So the crux of any type of planning is to communicate. Set up a day and time frame for check-ins with the office and their family. This is especially important for international travel. If they miss a check-in, keep in communication with the spouse or the other party to see if they missed a call-in as well. If they're staying in a country for a week or longer, they can stop at a cell phone kiosk and pick up a local SIM chip, which is quite cheap. Last I knew, someone I knew bought a chip in Italy, and it was $13. So that made their phone calls within the country local and no longer roaming. Data is the most expensive part of global travel, not the phone calls. With the global cell phone plan, you need to call to add it. It will go for 30 days and automatically fall off. The most expensive per minute, as it stands today, is in Southeast Asia at over 4 cents a minute. Data is more expensive, and it's now included in most global plans. You can opt to fail over to an additional block of data if you go over. Overages are very expensive. I manage the cell phone account for the college where I work, and we have about 80 phones at this point, and people travel internationally for conferences all the time. Plus, we have universities in both Vietnam and China, so we travel there quite often. We had a faculty member once travel to Sweden to make a presentation, but she didn't tell me. Without the global cell phone plan, the overages were $1,200. I didn't know about individual contracts, but our government contract allows us to add the plan after the trip as long as it's in the same month, which is beneficial to know. Of course, technology keeps getting better, and with 5G being instituted across the nation, connections are faster and more efficient. Many people just use WhatsApp when they travel. It seems to work. But there are places in New York State where you can hit Canadian cell phone towers, and you don't know you're hitting Canadian cell phone towers. Another suggestion is to check the weather for the time frame of the trip for the intended destination. Does the boss need a coat, gloves, scarf, or shorts and tank tops and flip-flops? It's not comfortable to be in a location and be over or underdressed for the weather. A tip I learned early in my association membership days attending national conferences is to send things home. Most conference centers or even hotels have FedEx or UPS offices on site, or the hotel can arrange for a pickup and add it to your bill. Send your FedEx number with your traveler so they can be billed directly to the company rather than out of their pocket. You may have discounts that the individual may not have access to. I went to Washington, D.C. for a conference in the year 2000. My friend shipped home the materials from our vendor expo, which included all sorts of papers, samples, lots of samples. I didn't have the extra money to do the same, and I carried 2 shopping bags on the plane. Back then they let you. Halfway home, one bag split, and it was horrible and embarrassing because all my stuff spread all over the floor. Make sure they've arranged for someone to pet sit or house sit, water the plants, hold their mail, etc. Ask if they want trip insurance, and create a checklist so nothing is forgotten or leaves your boss stranded. It's always nice to remind them if they've packed their cell phone chargers, laptop charger, an actual pen and notepad, nail clippers, first aid kit, and in some countries, toilet paper. The same husband who traveled to Mexico also spent 4 weeks in Japan and a separate 2 weeks in China. They were different trips. I told him to pack bottles of water, this was pre 9/11, and toilet paper. I even found travel toilet paper for him, and he laughed at me until he got there. And even the American hotel had a water trough in the floor for the shower and the toilet. The shower head, well, there was no head, it was just a pipe that came out of the wall. And he wasn't laughing when he got home. One last tip. Don't drink the water, even within the U.S. Every water department is slightly different, and drinking water or frozen cocktails can provide Montezuma's revenge. I know a group of ladies who went to Mexico on vacation, and they were having a great time and didn't give a second thought to drink those frozen daiquiris at the hotel bar. They all got sick. Just think of the first reunion for Sex and the City movie where Charlotte opened her mouth in the shower. Enough said. It's important to have a debrief, even if you've already had the venting discussion about the hotel or the airline where everything went wrong. Give your boss a day or two to come down from the travel angst and can have a more objective view of what happened. They may have more insight and be more aware of any part they may have played in the troublesome travel. The more traveling your boss does, the quicker you can pull together your preferred airline, hotel, rental car company, etc. It's in your boss's best interest to let you know that a specific hotel has gone downhill and not to book them in it again. We had a local Radisson near us that had a reputation for bed bugs. They did the sanitation, but business had gone downhill so badly that no one wanted to risk staying there. In other words, the hotel and restaurant staff either quit or no one cared about delivering the service the Radisson had been known for in the last couple of decades. They started running crazy cheap packages and eventually got some of their business back. But it's hard to come back from that kind of bad press. During your debrief meeting is a good time to collect receipts if they haven't forwarded them to you already. Now is the time for the restaurant receipt, the cab fare receipt, baggage fee receipts from the airline, etc. it's probably not necessary to add that all reimbursements need to comply with the corporate policy and adopted accounting rules. My organization does not require a receipt for anything under, it's either $15 or $18. So you don't have to worry about road tolls or tipping the baggage person at the airport. My former CFO had an issue paying for alcohol because we were a not-for-profit entity, especially when more than one person was attending an event, conference, or whatever. So he would ask his admin to plot the receipts with the days and times of each person attending to make sure no one was double dipping. My IT CIO and our director went to New Orleans and had lunch at the rooftop pool, which to him was suspect. What he didn't know was that the college president had requested a report be prepared and delivered the day after they returned from this conference. They received the request while on the plane getting ready to take off on the way to the conference. So they were forced to miss some of the events. And yes, that was one of the questions that the CFO asked in order to get the report done and ready to be presented to the cabinet upon their return. They also had drinks with vendors and potential vendors. The vendors bought dinner and we bought drinks. They were named after desserts. So that's what the CFO thought he was paying for. The director had a specialty coffee at 10 p.m. one evening, and normally just one beverage is not considered reimbursable. However, because she hadn't expensed a meal for dinner, they went ahead and paid it. So know your reimbursement policy inside and out. Ask what you think may be silly questions. But we were all very glad when that man retired. With international planning, best practices, and knowledge, with intentional planning, best practices, and knowledge of personal preferences, you should be that rock star travel planner. Thank you so much for choosing your time to spend with us today. Webinars by Rockwell provides a wide variety of topics focused on the administrative profession. Watch our social media for announcements when new videos are released. Thank you, and bye for now.